Hello and welcome to the workshop. So in this video I'm going to be turning a resin and scrap wood offcut bowl. So the resin I've used for this project is the Glasscast 50 resin, which goes up to 25mm thickness. I've also used these tinting pigments. These are translucent pigments and you get all 6 primary colours, and I've also used in the project this mica powder from Caster's Choice, and it's the purple colour. And I've also the tints I used is the purple tint to go with the mica powder. I purchased the resin and the pigments from Easy Composites, and I'll leave a link to their website down below, and couldn't fault any of the delivery and the price, and it seemed a reasonable price for this amount of resin as well. So how have I got the blank to this point so far? Unfortunately, I didn't record any of the making of the blank, but I will describe how I've done it. A little while ago, my wife bought some shop-bought trifles, and whilst putting the packaging away, I realised that the plastic container that the trifle came in would make a good mould for a bowl. So that's what I done. I used the mould, the plastic container of the trifle to make the mould. I then got a load of scrap pieces of wood from the workshop, placed them all inside the bowl, put a waste block, which is this big chunk of oak. Sorry, it's oak. I know it's a bit extravagant for a waste block, but it was the only thing the right size I could have. In the middle, just so I didn't have to use so much resin. I then mixed up all the resin, put the tint in and the mica powder, and then poured the resin into the bowl. Just before I poured the resin in, I taped over the top of the waste block just to keep everything in place, because when you pour resin in and you've got pieces of wood in there, they all float to the top, and I really wanted some to stay down the bottom, and that's what I've got. Now I have to confess, this has already been turned, but I am going to turn the outside again. The reason being is because I spent a good evening putting the screw chuck on, turning the outside of the bowl. Unfortunately, when I was recording, there wasn't enough room on the SD card, so it stopped recording. When I found that out, I stopped, called it a night, went indoors. The next morning, got up, thought to myself, right, let's delete some of the photographs off of the SD card, because they're all saved to my Google account. That way I can free up some room on the SD card. Checked that everything was recorded and downloaded to the Google account, deleted everything off of the SD card, and unfortunately all the video I took of turning this outside vanished. So it hadn't downloaded properly to Google, unfortunately. So that's why I'm doing this now. So I'm going to now put this back on the lathe. I'm going to turn some more of this, because actually I want some more of the wood to come through on the outer side. At the moment it's completely resin coated, so I just want some of the wood, if you can see that, just to show up on the outside. So I'm going to film that now, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it's all going to be saved. I've got plenty of room on the SD card anyway, and then we'll start finishing the bowl. But at the moment, just looking at that, Looks really nice. You can see the mica powder swirls inside. I'm trying not to get some glare on it. I hope you can see that well, especially there. Okay, so let's get over to the lathe and we'll finish this off. So you might be able to see in this spot here I've got a little bubble which is I've sort of cut through as I've turning it, so it's like a half a bubble, so it's a little indent in the resin. And do you know what, I'm very impressed with this resin in bubble wise. I've got a rough piece here and I'm not too sure why, but what I'm gonna do is that hole in this piece here. Oh, actually I've just realised what it is. There's another piece of wood. This is separate to this piece coming up here. This is end grain from another piece of wood that's inside the mould. So or the blank I should say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this with some CA glue and the little bubble hole there as well, and they're the only things that I really need to fill in, to be honest. This is one reason why I wanted to use this resin, to see how it was affected by bubbles after it had been mixed, because I don't have a pressure pot or a vacuum chamber. So this has just been poured, mixed, tinted, the mica powder, poured into the mould and just left in our dining room just to cure. It was left for 3 weeks I think now, and it's looking really good. The only bubbles I can see that do affect it is what has come off of the pieces of wood, but you can't even see that on this turned piece. It might be different when we get inside, but I'm going to fill those holes in and then just sand it all back. So that's done the trick now. It's filled in that hole and it's filled in this rough part. So we can now sand all this back. So to help keep stop these pads from melting because they're going too fast, I've turned the speed down, and I'm using this, and this is used for cleaning headlights, plastic headlights. It's a nice little squirty bottle, just fill it up with water, that's all I'm doing when it runs out, but it's easier to control the water going onto the blank. So now to really make it shine, we're going to add some very fine, microfine abrasive paste from Yorkshire Grit, specially developed for resin. So that's the outside done. Now it's time to turn it around and hollow out the bowl. So here we go, the finished article. it's not perfect, and I didn't expect it to be. This was just, as I said in the beginning, a test piece to see how the resin performed, and mainly to see how many bubbles or what bubblage I was getting by not having a pressure pot or a vacuum chamber. So what have I learned by just doing this? A number of things. Firstly, if I'm going to do more resin work like this, or pens or anything like that, I need a pressure pot or a vacuum chamber. And secondly, obviously again, a vacuum chamber to possibly stabilise any of the wood components you might use in a pen blank or a bowl, for example, because the stabilisation of the wood prevents all the small bubbles. If I can bring it really close, you can see around all these bubbles going up here. See if there's a good... I can't really see. There is plenty of bubbles in there, whether you can see them or not, around here, trying to get it out of the light. So they all produced bubbles because there's bubbles, you know, there's air pockets in the wood. So stabilising the wood before using the resin prevents that from happening, because the stabilisation fluid replaces all the air in the wood. So that's why you have to stabilise wood before you use it in the resin. That way you don't get any bubbles. And that really, to be quite honest, is mainly where all the bubbles came from. The actual pouring of the in the mould and everything like that doesn't actually seem to have produced many, if at all, any bubbles, to be quite honest. So in my opinion, the Glasscast resin, which was only really meant for 25mm thick pours, this is roughly 75mm thick. Yes, it has got the wood in it, so maybe that compensates for it, but it's definitely poured a lot thicker than what it's recommended for. There was no soft parts in it. It was completely solid, completely cured, and this is roughly about 70mm thickness. So I think that resin has completely outperformed itself, to be quite honest, and highly recommended to be used for this type of purpose. I'll be using that again in the future. The pigments have performed really well. You know, they're meant to be translucent, so you can see through, and obviously you can see my hand through there, and you're getting a really good shot of the mica powder as well, the little sort of shiny, fleckly shot you're getting there. Fantastic, and I'm really pleased with it. Even though it's got bubbles in it, I'm really pleased with how this has turned out. Definitely be using the resin in the future, the pigments. I do have some projects that I would like to use for some tables, with like a river table type thing. I know that's probably a little bit old hat these days, but I still think they're quite popular. There's something I would like to do for the living room in our house. So this was that sort of experiment to see how it performed for something like that. So another thing that I've learned about using epoxy resin is when you're mixing it up and pouring the resin into the mould, is not to do it on your dining room table with a tablecloth on it. Because as you see, even though I poured it and there was no overflow from when I poured it, unfortunately when resin starts to cure, it heats up and it expands. And even though I did have parchment paper on here covering the whole lot, it overflowed, it ran down the tablecloth, which is now very solid, as you can see, down onto the floor, and now we have a nice hard
lump of resin on the carpet. So lesson learned. The reason I was doing this in the living room is because I didn't really want too much dust getting into it, rather than into the workshop where it was quite dusty. Don't think that will be happening again.
So with all that said and done, thank you for watching the video. If you've liked it and you want to see more, then please do the obvious, subscribe and give us a thumbs up. If you want to leave a constructive comment, leave it in the comments below. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. That's entirely your prerogative. So with all that said and done, that's me over and done with, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye everybody.